There are a few important techniques to learn when it comes to painting birds with gouache, so I'm going to do my best to demonstrate them in this module. Now, to demonstrate the different techniques, I've chosen this stunning lilac-breasted roller. So this little guy will be one of the individual bird classes to follow flying lessons, but I wanted to use him as an example now in this class because he's really got it all going on, and I can easily point out the areas where I use certain techniques. So you will get a little sneak peek at the lilac-breasted roller. So just watch along as I show you the different techniques I use, and then in the next module I'm going to break down the techniques in a way that you can learn them. When I'm painting a bird, I begin with a watery wash. So this first layer is done using the gouache, a lot like watercolors, and it's very fast and loose. So this is where a lot of that wet in wet magic happens as the colors all bleed together. I do go through phases in my sketchbook though, and sometimes I prefer a loose fluid style where I let the paint do its magic, but other times when my inner critic is speaking up, I can be a little bit obsessive with carving out lots of little details. So you'll probably find as well that over time, as you spend time experimenting, you'll start to develop your own working methods and style of painting as well. But even then, that style can vary a little bit depending on the mood you're in or even the kind of tension you're holding in your body. So I always find that getting that first layer down and blocking in the color quickly really helps dissolve any fear or resistance that blank pages can sometimes induce. And watching the colors play together on the page in unexpected ways always sparks some joy. Gouache is very fast to dry, and I like to work in such a way that I'm never waiting for paint to dry or worrying about dragging my hand through wet paint, and I'll be sure to share some of these tips in a later module. So the key to success with gouache is in getting the consistency of the paint right and knowing how much water to mix into the paint. So depending on which layer I'm working on, the consistency of the gouache I'm using will vary from the really watery paint used in the first layer to the thicker, creamy, opaque gouache used in the final layers. So in general, each new layer of gouache is a little bit thicker than the one underneath. Working in layers is really important, and gouache is so good for layering because unlike when you're working with watercolor paint where you have to preserve any area you want to be white, you can use gouache in layers from dark to light. So I always start with a layer of darker values. It's kind of like I'm painting in the shadows under the feathers first. So then when I start painting in the lighter layers over the top, those feathery strokes really stand out. Where gouache really shines is in its ability to be reactivated once it's dry. It's the thing that I love about gouache the most. So this means that I can come in with a damp brush after my paint is dry, reactivate it and soften any hard edges, or blend the area where two colors meet. And it just allows for really subtle color variations, and it means that the bird won't have such a flat, unrealistic finish. So being able to reactivate and blend the gouache also makes painting feathers really easy, especially in the areas where fluffy feathers all sort of blend together. There are a couple of ways to blend gouache, and it's such an important technique to learn when it comes to painting birds and using gouache in general really, so we'll cover that in depth in the next lesson. With all that being said though, it is this re-wettable characteristic of gouache that frustrates a lot of people because it can be a little bit tricky to get the hang of, especially when it comes to layering and adding a bold, flat colour without reactivating the layer below. It does take a little bit of practice, especially if you're used to painting with watercolors or acrylic paint, because they do feel similar and they look similar, but gouache does have some little quirks of its own. So in the next lesson we're going to get the gouache out and have a look at some of the different techniques in much more depth. So grab your paint and I'll see you there.